Tiffany Jensen didn't plan to text a billionaire. She only wanted her baby to stop crying. It was past midnight, that cold, hollow hour where the city felt frozen in silence. She sat on the kitchen floor of her tiny apartment, arms wrapped around herself, a worn blanket around her shoulders. Zion cried in the next room. His bottle was almost empty, mostly water. Tiffany stared at the empty formula can on the counter before picking up her phone with shaking hands. She opened her brother Derek's chat and typed, "Derek, I'm sorry to bother you again. I need $50 for formula. Zion is almost out. I get paid Friday. I'll pay you back, please." Her thumb hovered, then she hit send. But in her exhaustion, she pressed the wrong digit when saving the number. The message didn't go to Derek. It went to a stranger. A few minutes later, "I think you meant to send that to someone else." Tiffany froze. She grabbed her phone again. "Oh my God, I'm so sorry. Please ignore that. Wrong number." She locked the screen immediately, heart sinking. Across the city, in a glass penthouse that overlooked everything, Gideon Wright stared at the message, a number he never gave out, not to staff, not to friends, not to anyone. He read it again. $50 for formula. Zion is almost out. Something about it didn't feel fake. It felt lived in, raw, human. He typed, "Is your baby going to be okay?" Tiffany blinked at her screen. What kind of stranger asks that? She hesitated, then replied, "We'll manage. Sorry again." Gideon responded almost immediately, "I can help. No strings." She gave a bitter laugh. "Thanks, but I don't take money from strangers." He replied, "I'm Gideon, not a stranger anymore." She didn't answer. She went back to rocking Zion, tears falling quietly as guilt, exhaustion, and hunger mixed together. Then finally, she gave in. She sent her payment link. Seconds later, $5,000 received. Gideon Wright. Tiffany froze completely. She opened the app again. It was real. She typed, "I only needed $50. This is too much." His reply came quickly. "It's already yours. One less thing to worry about." That broke her. Because she didn't cry when she lost her job. She didn't cry when her car got taken. She didn't cry when Zion's father, Marcus, left without a word after hearing about the pregnancy. But this kindness she didn't earn. It shattered her. "Thank you. I don't even know what to say." "You don't have to say anything," Gideon replied. "Just take care of Zion." Tiffany froze. She never told him her son's name. That night, she couldn't sleep. She kept staring at the transfer screen. People don't just give $5,000 away. Not to strangers, not to her. She opened the chat again, then typed, "Why would you help me? You don't even know me." A long pause, then, "Because I know what it feels like to lose someone you can't save." Tiffany swallowed hard. "That's not an answer. It's the only one I have." Later, she typed, "I want to pay you back." Gideon replied, "For what?" "For the formula, for helping, for not ignoring me." Another pause. Then, "I'll figure it out." Gideon's reply came sharper. "You don't need to earn kindness." The next morning, there was a knock. Tiffany froze. No one knocked here, ever. She opened the door slowly. A delivery man stood there. "Delivery for Tiffany Jensen." She nodded slowly. He handed her a clipboard. Inside were boxes, heavy ones. She opened them one by one. Formula, diapers, bottles, baby wipes, clothes, everything Zion needed. Perfect brands, expensive ones. At the bottom was a note. He should have what he needs. Zion deserves better. Gideon. Tiffany sat on the floor for a long time. Then she whispered, "Who are you?" Later, she searched the name. Gideon Wright, CEO of Wright Helix Technologies. Net worth, billions. Former military, private, hidden from media, a ghost billionaire. Her hands shook. She returned to the chat. "Why are you really doing this?" Minutes passed. Then,
Because I know what it's like to lose someone you can't save, and no child should suffer for it. Tiffany frowned. I don't want pity. It's not pity, it's recognition. A new message came. Do you work? Tiffany hesitated. I did. Biochem research, diagnostics, before everything fell apart, before Zion. You're trained. I was, until life stopped caring. Then, come to Right Helix tomorrow, 11 a.m. Ask for Lillian Grant. Tiffany stared. Are you offering me a job? I'm offering you a chance to start again. She went, holding Zion tightly, nervous, exhausted, uncertain. At Right Helix, the building felt unreal, too clean, too quiet, too powerful. Reception smiled. You're expected. That word hit her strangely. Expected? She was taken upstairs. A woman greeted her. Lillian Grant, Gideon's chief of staff. Then she was led into a room. Tiffany stopped. Inside was a nursery, fully built. Crib, toys, soft lighting, everything. For Zion. Her breath caught. This is for me? Lillian nodded softly. He said it might help you feel safe. Tiffany whispered, why would he do this? Lillian answered, because he knows what it feels like to walk into life alone. Later, Gideon walked in. Seeing him in person felt heavier than online. Tall, controlled, but tired, human. You came, he said simply. Tiffany stood awkwardly. I wasn't sure I should. But you did, he replied. Silence. Then he said, you don't owe me anything. This isn't charity. Then what is it? Investment. He slid a folder to her. Temporary role, finance, audit support, flexible hours, salary higher than anything she'd ever seen. Tiffany blinked. Why me? Gideon looked at her for a long moment. Because you didn't ask for more than you needed, even when you were drowning. She accepted. Days turned into weeks. Tiffany worked while Zion stayed in the nursery nearby. For the first time in years, she felt her mind wake up again. Numbers made sense again. Patterns returned. And then she saw it. Something off. Small payments, repeated vendors, hidden inside normal transactions, too small to trigger alarms, but too frequent to ignore. She leaned closer, whispered, this doesn't add up. Later, Gideon appeared at her door. You're settling in? I think I found something, she said carefully. His expression changed slightly. Keep it between us. Why? Because if you're right, it changes everything. Tiffany looked at Zion sleeping behind the glass nursery, and for the first time, she wasn't just surviving anymore. She was about to uncover the truth of the world she had been pulled into. Tiffany Jensen stared at the screen longer than she meant to. The numbers weren't just messy, they were intentional. Someone was moving money in patterns small enough to avoid attention, but consistent enough to build something hidden underneath the system. She copied the vendor codes into a private folder, her pulse rising. Then she whispered, "This isn't an error, it's a structure." Later that evening, Gideon appeared outside her glass office without warning. He didn't knock. He never really did. "Settling in?" he asked calmly. Tiffany didn't look away from her screen. "I think I found something." That made him pause. "Show me," he replied. She hesitated. "You said bring it to you directly." "I did." She turned the monitor slightly. Rows of payments, repeated vendors, fake project codes. Gideon's expression didn't change immediately, but something in his jaw tightened. "How long has this been happening?" "Long enough," he answered quietly. Tiffany frowned. "You already knew." A silence stretched between them. Finally, Gideon said, "I suspected. You confirmed." Tiffany leaned back. "So now what?" Gideon looked toward Zion, sleeping in the nursery behind the glass. "Now we find out who's feeding it." Her stomach dropped slightly. "This is bigger than I thought." "It always is." Over the next days, things shifted. Meetings that used to be calm became quiet and tense. Emails slowed. People watched Tiffany differently, not warmly, carefully, like she was stepping too close to something buried. One afternoon, Lillian pulled her aside. "Be careful," she said softly. "Of what?" Lillian hesitated. "Of being seen as his weakness." Tiffany frowned. "I'm not." But Lillian cut her off. "In this building, proximity becomes perception." That night, Tiffany texted Gideon, "People are starting to notice." He replied almost instantly, "Let them." She frowned. "That's not comforting. It's not meant to be." Days later, Tiffany stayed late. Zion was asleep. The office was quiet. She found another pattern, deeper this time, a second layer, transfers that didn't match any internal vendor system at all. This wasn't leakage, it was laundering through silence. Her breath caught. Someone inside is moving money outside the system. She was about to save the file when the screen flickered, then locked. Her system access froze. Her heart jumped. Then a message appeared. "Stop digging where you don't understand." No name, no ID, just a warning. Tiffany stood slowly. "This isn't just accounting," she whispered. The next morning, Gideon walked in earlier than usual. "You saw it," he said. She nodded. "Someone shut me out." He looked at her for a long moment. "Good. That means you're close." "Close to what?" Gideon's voice dropped. "The center." A beat. Then she asked, "Why did you really bring me here?" For the first time, he didn't answer immediately. He looked through the glass at Zion, then back at her. "Because people like you notice things people like me miss." Tiffany frowned. "And what do you miss?" His voice softened slightly. "Cost." That night, Tiffany couldn't sleep. Something about him stayed in her mind. Not just power, not just wealth, but loneliness. Weeks passed. The investigation deepened. Tiffany found the source, a cluster of internal approvals tied to high-level access. Too high. Only executives could authorize it. She whispered, "This isn't random staff." She looked up slowly. "This is leadership." The moment she said it, Gideon didn't react, but the room felt colder. "Are you sure?" he asked. Tiffany nodded. "I've traced it 3 times." Silence. Then he said, "Then we proceed carefully." But carefully wasn't enough anymore, because someone else now knew she knew. That night, as she prepared to leave, her screen lit up again. Another message, but this time, "Step away from Helix Core or your child becomes part of the problem." Tiffany froze. Her blood went cold. She called Gideon. He answered instantly. "What happened?" Tiffany's voice shook. "I got a warning." Silence. Then his tone changed. "Stay inside the building." "Why?" Because his voice lowered. "Now they know you matter." And for the first time, Gideon Wright sounded worried. Tiffany Jensen stood frozen after the call ended. "Stay inside the building." Gideon's voice still echoed in her mind. Zion slept behind the glass nursery wall, unaware that everything around him had just shifted. The quiet office no longer felt safe, it felt watched. Minutes later, Gideon appeared in person. No warning, no entourage, just him. His expression was sharper than before. "You didn't leave?" he asked immediately. "I couldn't. You said stay." A pause. "Good," he finally said. Then softer. "That may have saved your life." Tiffany's stomach dropped. "This is getting serious, isn't it?" Gideon didn't answer right away. Instead, he looked at the monitor, at her files, at the flagged vendor trail. Then he said, "It was never not serious." That night, security increased across Helix Core. Access logs tightened, elevators restricted. Whispers moved through the building like static. People avoided eye contact with Tiffany, not because she was unknown anymore, but because she was dangerous to know. Later, in a locked conference room, Gideon finally spoke plainly. "What you found isn't just fraud." Tiffany leaned forward. "What is it then?" His jaw tightened slightly. "A diversion system. Money is being siphoned through Helix Core to fund external operations." Tiffany frowned. "External? Like what?" Gideon's eyes darkened. "I don't know yet." A pause. Then, "But whoever is doing it is high enough to erase records and people." Silence filled the room. Tiffany whispered, "So I'm not just auditing numbers." "No," Gideon said. "You're pulling threads out of something someone built to stay hidden." For the first time, Tiffany felt fear not just for herself, but for Zion. She turned slightly towards the nursery glass. He was asleep. Peaceful. Too peaceful. "I want out," she said suddenly. Gideon looked at her. "You can leave. I said that from the beginning." Tiffany shook her head. "I don't mean the job. I mean this situation." Gideon studied her carefully, then said, If you walk away now, they reset the system. You disappear. The money keeps moving, and nothing changes. Tiffany swallowed. And if I stay? His voice lowered. Then they'll come for the thing they think matters most to you. You and Zion. Tiffany went still. That night, she didn't sleep. Neither did Gideon. At 3:12 a.m., alarms triggered across the system. Unauthorized access attempt. Multiple internal servers breached. Tiffany rushed into the office barefoot. "What's happening?" she asked. Gideon was already there. "They're accelerating," he said. "Why now?" He looked at her. "Because they know we're close." On the screen, files began disappearing in real time. Entire trails being wiped.
Tiffany's hands shook as she worked. "They're cleaning it," she said. Gideon's voice sharpened. "Can you trace it backward?" "I'm trying," but then her screen froze, locked. Again, only this time, a message appeared. "You were warned." Tiffany stepped back. "They're inside the system." Gideon didn't respond immediately. Then, "No." A pause. "They're inside the company." Silence hit like a physical weight. Tiffany whispered, "Who?" Gideon stared at the screen longer than he should have. Then finally, "I think I already know." The next morning, the entire building was different. Too quiet, too controlled. Security shifted positions. People avoided Gideon's floor, and one name kept appearing in access logs. Someone with executive clearance. Someone trusted. Lillian Grant entered the room without knocking. Gideon looked at her immediately. "Explain it," he said. She didn't deny it. She didn't react. She simply said, "You were never supposed to bring her in." Tiffany froze. "What does that mean?" Lillian's gaze shifted to her. "It means you were never part of the plan." The room went silent. Gideon's voice dropped. "Was I?" Lillian didn't answer him. Instead, the system was already in place before her. She exposed it early. Tiffany felt her world tilt. "So I was bait?" Lillian finally looked at her fully. "No, an accident." Silence shattered the room. Gideon's expression changed for the first time. Controlled anger, restrained, but real. "You used my company," he said slowly. Lillian replied calmly, "I stabilized your empire. You just didn't see the cost." Tiffany stepped back. Zion. That was the only thing in her mind now. Gideon turned to Tiffany. "Take Zion and leave the building now." She didn't hesitate, but as she reached the nursery, security doors locked automatically, override activated. Her breath stopped. Through the glass wall, Gideon saw it too. His voice went low. "No." For the first time, his control cracked. He walked to the console, typed once, twice, then said, "They've locked internal access." Tiffany's voice shook. "Then unlock it." He looked at her. "I can't, not without triggering full system lockdown." Tiffany whispered, "So we're trapped." Gideon looked at her. "No, just target it." Then he turned, and for the first time since this began, he said something different. "I'm not losing another person." Something in his voice changed everything. Not billionaire, not CEO, just a man refusing history to repeat itself. He looked at Tiffany. "Stay behind me." What followed wasn't loud, it wasn't explosive, it was controlled precision, security overrides, system reroutes, emergency internal shutdowns. Gideon dismantled his own system piece by piece to protect them. Minutes later, access returned, doors unlocked, control restored. But something had changed permanently. Lillian was gone. Records partially erased, but traces remained. Enough. Later that night, the building was silent again. Tiffany held Zion tightly. "You knew something like this could happen," she said quietly. Gideon didn't deny it. "I suspected." "Why didn't you stop it?" He looked at her. "Because I needed someone who wasn't part of my world to see what I couldn't." Tiffany frowned. And now? Gideon paused, then said, "Now we finish it." Weeks later, the internal fraud network collapsed quietly. No headlines, no public scandal, just disappearances in accounts, contracts terminated, and silence where corruption once lived. Tiffany stood in her office one evening, watching Zion sleep. Gideon entered quietly. "It's over," he said. She didn't look up immediately. "Was it worth it?" A pause. Then he said, "Yes." Tiffany finally looked at him. "For what?" Gideon glanced at Zion, then back at her. "For reminding me that systems don't matter if the people inside them are lost." Silence. Not heavy, not tense, just real. Tiffany whispered, "What happens now?" Gideon looked at her for a long moment, then answered honestly, "I don't know. Maybe that's the first time in a long time I've said that." Zion stirred softly in his sleep. Tiffany held him closer, and for the first time since that midnight message, she wasn't surviving chaos anymore. She was standing inside the beginning of something new. And far above the city, Gideon Wright finally understood something he had avoided for years. Not everything he built was meant to protect him. Some things were meant to change him.